Welcome to the Greener Grass podcast from Bluebird Botanicals. I'm your host, Lex Pelger. This week we're talking with Jonathan Miller, a lawyer who serves as the general counsel to the U.S. Hemp Farming and Business Roundtable. As you'll hear in the intro and see in the episode notes, he's had quite a colorful career. We'll hear his updates on the state of hemp soon. But before we start, I wanted to share two pieces of heartening news. First, two House Democrats just introduced a bill for the full federal legalization of cannabis to match the bill from Cory Booker in the Senate. Of course, we've seen these bills before, but it seems like there's more support than ever for a sensible cannabis policy in the United States. And then, in more local news, on January 7th at 1:20 a.m. on Spruce Street in Boulder, Colorado, my daughter, Sophia Estelle, entered the world after 32 hours of labor. She hasn't released any statements yet, but she does seem to enjoy Papa's airplane rides to the diaper table. Stay tuned here for any more breaking news. And now, on with the show. This show is brought to you by Bluebird Botanicals, to spread education about cannabis and other things on the greener side of life. Bluebird CBD oil comes from farms in southern Colorado and is grown using only water, soil, and sunlight. Go to bluebirdbotanicals.com for more info. Hello, everybody. This is Lex Pelger, and I'm here with Jonathan Miller, who is a lawyer who went to Harvard. He wrote The Evolving Law and Regulation of Industrial Hemp in the U.S. He writes for the Daily Beast. He was at the final table of the World Series of Poker and was the straight man on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and is at the law firm of Frost, Brown, and Todd in Lexington, Kentucky. And the reason we know him is because he helped to start the U.S. Hemp Roundtable. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about actually was your thoughts on the H.R. 350 bill in D.C.
Well, we're very optimistic and hopeful that the Industrial Hemp Farming Act of 2018 now, H.R. 3530, will pass in some form during this second year of the congressional session, which began yesterday. The kind of support it has is very rare in Washington. It's not only bipartisan, but it's cross-ideological. We have people who are very liberal Democrats. We have people who are very right-wing libertarian Republicans, and then a lot of folks in the middle. And that kind of coalition bodes well for ultimate passage. So, a lot of work to do. The sausage-making process in Washington is always very ugly, and we're living through one of the most difficult and polarized times in American modern history. But despite all that, we're very optimistic that by the end of the year, in some form, industrial hemp will be completely and permanently removed from the Controlled Substances Act.
And so that's the main purpose of the bill, is to remove from the CSA. Are there other things in it that you see as really good progress?
Well, there are a number of elements that the allowing it to be removed from the Controlled Substances Act would accomplish. There are a lot of concerns out there right now of people who are in the industry having trouble finding banks that will deposit their money, that finding credit card companies that will process their transactions, finding shipping companies that will ship their products, and the H.R. 3530 would resolve all of that and would take the DEA out of the business of monitoring a agricultural commodity, which is not a controlled substance. So you can't, as you and your listeners know, you can't smoke hemp, or if you do, you're not going to get a high or a buzz, and there's no reason why the DEA should care about this when they've got such an enormous problem with opioid abuse going on across the country. And so the politics are such that it's been rapidly evolving, and we really are optimistic that we're going to have some progress this year.
That is exciting. And you're using your position at the U.S. Hemp Roundtable to help push some changes into that bill, I understand? hopefully?
Yeah, so the U.S. Hemp Roundtable was created at the beginning of last year to help both pass but also to improve H.R. 3530. The House bill has been released and will go through the committee process. There's a Senate bill that can be released any day now. Senator Mitch McConnell, Senator Rand Paul, and Senator Ron Wyden are co-sponsoring that. And one of our goals, our main goal is to get these things passed, but we'd also like to improve and strengthen them. We'd like to have some clearer definitions that make it more clear that things like hemp-derived cannabinoid CBD products could be sold at retail level. We want to get the USDA more involved in the progress of the industry, and so those are the kinds of improvements that we're looking to make.
And one of the intriguing changes you were talking about is trying to get a better definition of what hemp actually means. So could you tell us what the definition of hemp is right now and what you think an ideal definition might be?
Sure. Historically, or at least in the 20th, in most of the 20th century, hemp was defined as the non-psychoactive parts of the cannabis plant. And so some people interpreted that to only include things like the stalk and fiber and seeds. We have interpreted that to include parts of the flower, as long as they're non-psychoactive. But again, that's a debate that's been going on in the courts and in the body politic for several decades. When the Farm Bill was passed, it made a clearer definition saying that all parts of the cannabis plant, as long as that they have less than 0.3% THC, and as long as they are grown or cultivated in a state that has adopted a hemp pilot program, all parts of that are included as hemp and are exempt from the Controlled Substances Act. But still, despite that, the DEA has still been up to some mischief, and they're saying, well, we don't include extracts like CBD as all parts, that's something separate, that comes from marijuana. And it's a very inaccurate definition, but we would like to see 3530 and any final law be improved so that it makes absolutely 100% clear that extracts of cannabinoids, as long as they're less than 0.3% THC, fit under the definition of industrial hemp.
And how do you feel personally about that exact number of 0.3 for the THC?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because it really is an arbitrary number. There are a lot of studies that say that you can't get intoxicated by anything less than 1% or maybe even 2 or 3%. However, the politics are such that we believe we can get get support for a bill that uses the 0.3 mark, which is the mark in many European countries, and ultimately we'd be supportive of efforts to raise that, and I'm hopeful what happens is we get this passed at 0.3, and down the road people understand more about the science, and it can be raised later.
And you're making some other really interesting propositions there for more normalization, including getting special grants that are specifically for new plants and research on plants. And you're trying to get hemp included in, so it's just treated like one more intriguing agricultural product that's researched by federal scientists.
Yeah, I'm here in Lexington, Kentucky, and in the 19th century. Hemp was the leading cash crop here in Kentucky, and it was a mainstay of the agriculture community for centuries in this country, and only in the 20th century did it become considered a controlled substance. So we want it to be considered, again, an agriculture commodity. We've got the science that helps law enforcement distinguish between hemp and marijuana, and if it's an agriculture commodity, it should be treated like peanuts and soybeans and corn and the like, and be eligible for grants and loans and trade protection, et cetera. And so what we would like to see ultimately happen is hemp be treated just like any other agricultural commodity and be eligible for that kind of support that our farmers need.
And there has to be something special about Kentucky. First hemp, and then the center of the moonshiners and running these things around. That libertarian streak down where you are, does that play into to you guys out there fighting for this rather beleaguered plant?
It's interesting. Kentucky really was the center of the universe for hemp production in the 19th century. I went to Henry Clay High School here in Lexington, which was named after Henry Clay, the great compromiser, a very famous figure in the 19th century. He was a hemp farmer. And so it is very fitting that Kentucky, again, is helping take the lead on this. But it is also just kind of a coincidence that so many of the political leaders on this issue and people with such power and such a platform happen to be from Kentucky, whether it's Jamie Comer, who has introduced the H.R. 3530, and he was the former agriculture commissioner here in Kentucky that got the ball rolling, or it's Mitch McConnell, who's one of the very most powerful members of Congress, maybe one of the more powerful people in the world, or Rand Paul, who is one of the most famous celebrities in Congress. And that is the core of our coalition, and the fact that they all come from Kentucky is a bit of coincidence, but we like to say it must be something in the water here as well that has created such great leadership.
Oh, that's great. And one of the normalization pieces you mentioned earlier, talking about amending the banking bill of 1970 to really let this industry grow. How would you like to see that added to the bill and incorporated in real life?
Well, we believe that currently that as long as hemp is grown as part of a pilot program, it is exempted under the Controlled Substances Act. And as a result, any bank in the country should be comfortable in engaging in financial transactions. Unfortunately, banks are conservative institutions. Many of them are federally chartered, and they don't want to be subject to DEA scrutiny. And so what we want to do is have clear language that tells banks and financial institutions and shipping companies and again, credit card companies, hey, this is an agriculture commodity. It is not a controlled substance. You do not have to worry about being raided or being subject to prosecution.
And so if anyone out there wanted to join the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, they could and add their force to moving this stuff forward?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, again, is just got started last year. We have 30 companies and all of the leading national grassroots organizations that are part of our team. We get together in person 4 times a year. We have our members on phone calls every other week, and we're plotting strategies not only to pass legislation, but also set up a guidance plan, a self-regulated organization for the industry. We'd love to launch that in early 2019. Again, part of our platform is to create a fully professionalized industry, just like every other agriculture commodity, and that's what we're gearing towards.
Excellent. And so just to shift to the news a little bit, and my first question is actually what it's like for you interacting with all of these different government agencies, and it seems like often the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and you get so many different responses to what you're trying to do here. What's that like?
Well, it's interesting. When we interact with the politicians, the members of Congress, state and local legislators and governors, they see how popular hemp and hemp products are. And once they are educated about the differences between hemp and marijuana, now some of them are already for marijuana, but there are a lot of politicians out there who are against marijuana, but who learn about hemp and become supportive. And so that's been very fascinating and exciting. The challenge has been with some law enforcement agencies that have been slower to grab at this understanding. Here in Kentucky, we've met extensively with local and state law enforcement. They've been great, but you get an organization like the DEA, which continues to send out conflicting signals about how they're going to view hemp. It's been quite frustrating, and so that's why it's so important to get legislation passed that basically takes DEA out of this and allows us to become treated like any other agriculture commodity.
And so in your update, you were saying how it feels like there's a little bit of gentle news in the fact that DEA has been saying that hemp isn't going to be an agency priority, especially with the opioid epidemic going on.
Yeah, the DEA speaks out of both sides of its mouth. You have certain spokespeople who will be quoted in saying that hemp is illegal, even hemp grown in Farm Bill programs, which is clearly untrue. You get others, the DEA's lawyers that have filed a brief that said that we're not going to interfere with the Farm Bill. So that's good news. Then you get still others who say, well, I don't know whether it's illegal or not, but we're not going to invest our resources in it. We've got a much bigger problem with opioids. And so, I think, there are a lot of good people at all of these agencies, a lot of good people at the DEA, and in a matter of time, I think the folks who recognize the value of hemp for American farmers are going to outweigh those who are still kind of stuck in this rut, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward without those kinds of concerns.
In regards to the USDA and the FDA, how would you like to see them involved with the hemp industry the most? What would you think would be a reasonable approach for those two agencies?
Well, I'd love to see the USDA be treating hemp just like any other agricultural commodity, and so being supportive and helping us with grants and loans and certifications and organics and all those kinds of things that it does for other products. And I think that there's a lot of willingness among agency officials to do that. They just need to get the guidance from Congress that it's okay to do that. The FDA is a different game here. We, there is concern about, even if we pass this legislation, that the FDA might try to enforce against hemp-derived CBD products, and that's going to be a discussion that we're going to need to continue in our roundtable. We're going to be vigilant about fighting. We want to make sure that hemp-derived CBD, which has been sold in grocery stores and natural food stores, that will continue to be able to be sold over the counter, even when folks come up with a medicine that passes through FDA standards. So a lot of work that's going to still need to be done. But again, what I've seen over the last 5 years has been just enormous, rapid progress. You just don't see this normally in politics. So I'm confident that we'll continue in the right direction.
And I am curious, what drew you out of all the the political causes you've worked with and things like that? What drew you to hemp in your work?
It's a really crazy and funny story. I was the state treasurer for 2 terms and was an elected official. And if you had asked me about marijuana or hemp when I was in politics, I didn't really care about it. So I would say I was opposed, because that's the easy thing to do when you're in a conservative state like Kentucky. But a guy that I had run against for one office, who was a very strong hemp legalization advocate during his life, passed away about 6 years ago. And in his honor, I wrote a piece for the Daily Beast saying that he was right and that we should legalize hemp. And the agriculture commissioner at the time, Jamie Comer, saw that piece. He asked me if I could help him get legislation passed in Kentucky to legalize it. I said, sure, we don't have a chance of winning, but I'm happy to help now that I'm out of politics. And by God, we won. And by God, Mitch McConnell saw that and became a big champion on the national level. And so we've seen just tremendous progress now. And not only do I represent the Hemp Roundtable, but I represent in my private practice as a lawyer probably 24 companies in this space, helping interpret the laws that I've helped draft, and it's become the largest part of what I do. So it is kind of funny how in the space of 5 years, hemp has turned my world upside down in a way that I never would have imagined.
Oh, that's great. We'll link to that article in the notes for this episode. Then that sounds great.
Great.
And I wanted to ask you about the states as well. If there are any states, I see you wrote in your update, there's 25,000 acres of hemp now under cultivation. And I was wondering what states that you really liked their approach so far, and what states you were most excited to be coming online hopefully soon.
So we have 34 states that have in some form legalized hemp. Some of them really haven't done very much, but there's now about a good dozen, 14, 15 that are starting out. I'm proud, I'm obviously biased, but I think Kentucky's got the best program. We were the first. Colorado, naturally, because of its leadership on marijuana, also has a very, very strong hemp program. And I think you see Kentucky and Colorado as the leaders right now, but there are others that are coming online that are really making a real strong effort. Tennessee is one of those. those. Wisconsin just passed a bill just a few weeks ago that is very strong. I know New York, Governor Cuomo would really love to see the hemp industry thrive, and Pennsylvania has just expanded its program. Now, California, as you know, just legalized recreational marijuana, so that, anytime marijuana is legalized, that, of course, puts an umbrella over hemp as well. So I think this is going to be really exploding over the next several years, and it's going to be up to what states want it the most and push the hardest. But I can tell you Kentucky will definitely continue to be at the forefront because of our strong history and our strong political support.
Great. And one last question I'd like to ask before I let you go is, if you were put in charge of, say, the federal hemp program, what would be the things that would be most important to you to make sure we're in that? What would be the lines in the sand you think are most vital to a strong hemp program?
Well, we first of all need to have very clear laws, black and white laws, that make it clear that hemp and hemp products, including hemp-derived cannabinoids, are legal and can be sold in retail as other agriculture commodities are today. There obviously needs to be some guidance and regulations, but I would encourage them to work with our industry, with our self-regulated organization, just like they do with other agriculture commodities, to come up with good, strong standards and practices to make sure that we weed out those companies that are not good actors in the field and help promote those farmers and companies that are. And so that really, I think, is our two-stage strategy. Number one, get this bill passed so that we have solid legalization and comfort, and number two, let's develop a very professionalized industry so that consumers will know and be able to pick out products that are do what they say, and that provide the kinds of benefits that are promised.
Well, thank you so much for your work in expanding hemp in this country, and for all your work expanding the knowledge. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Great. Thanks for the time, and I'm happy to join you any other time.
Greener Grass is a Bluebird Botanicals podcast. Their CBD oil supports a healthy body and a strong endocannabinoid system. They've got friendly customer service who can answer any of your questions, and the number is right there at the top of their webpage. But, per the FDA, they won't be able to make any medical claims for these nutritional supplements. That's also the reason you'll hear little about CBD on this show. There's no need for us to add more evidence about CBD when a simple Google search will give you more than you can read in a month of Sundays. So this show covers the cannabis world and more, with editorial freedom from Bluebird Botanicals. Thanks for joining the Greener Grass podcast. As always, our audio alchemist is Matt Payne. The Gypsy Jazz theme music comes from Brett Van Donsel. Our beautiful bird sounds are courtesy of Lang Elliott. And I'm your host, Lex Pelger, wishing you a bright green day.